On. We are live on a Tuesday night. We got Facebook and YouTube church going up on a Tuesday. Um, I'm excited for the topic tonight. I just got the notification on my phone, so I'm going to give it a few seconds for people to log in on Facebook and YouTube. It is good to see you. Welcome to our God Talk. We've labeled these lectures the Underground Railroad. Here's the purpose: we're studying our way towards freedom. And this is a sacred space, right? The beauty of a sacred space is like God makes things holy. And then to a certain extent, like humans kind of get to, based off of their understanding and what they receive from God and all that, humans have the chance to, what's going on, y'all? I see y'all logging in. Humans have the chance to decide this is sacred. We're setting this apart. This is what we're setting apart because this has something to do with how we communicate with God, and how we experience God. So this is a sacred space. So I say welcome. I see Shakira is on. What's going on? I see, oh my gosh, Tanisha is on. Look at God. Look at God. Mama Trice is on. Amy is on. That means my grandmother is on as well. I got a question. I hope y'all are ready for this tonight. If you haven't yet, make sure you all harass the like and the love button. Make sure Tanisha, you're right. You always on. I appreciate that about you. Consistency is going to get you far in life. I was listening to something on my timeline the other day. I think it was Darius Daniels that said it. Said your ability to be great is tied to your ability to do things that seem boring, because repetition is so important to excellence. And so I appreciate your consistency because your consistency is going to lead to your excellence. That's just for you, Tanisha, but that's for everybody else as well. So make sure y'all share this if you haven't yet. We're going to get ready to jump into our topic. Last week, we talked about one of the first methodologies that are important to note about the world in front of the text. And so here's the premise. And actually, let me go to our rules first. Y'all know there ain't no such thing as a class without rules. And so I want to make sure everybody's abiding by the same rules. Here are the rules of engagement. Number one, we are not here for indoctrination. We're here for education, meaning we don't just want to know one way or one perspective or one position. We want to be educated. We want to know two opinions. We want to know multiple opinions. And then from those multiple opinions, we can figure out where we stand and where God is calling us. In this season, I can testify some things I stood in one position, and then God take you through a season, and you like, you know what, they ain't even what I believe anymore. And there's nothing wrong with that. You can change what you believe based off of what God reveals to you. So that's why you got to make sure you're careful with how you treat people that believe differently from you. My job is not to get you to think how I think. It's to get you to start thinking. Y'all should know these rules by now. There's no such thing as a stupid position or a stupid question. And you can enter this space with whatever beliefs you have. So we are at the lucky number 10. And so with across YouTube and Facebook. So I'm ready to get started. Now, you all know this is a space of education. So it's going to be a little educational tonight. But right after that, we're going to get into some practical stuff. And we're not going to get to cover all of womanist theology tonight. I'm probably going to try to bring somebody on with me next week. Because part of this methodology says that you have to center the experiences and the voices of Black women. So I can do my job to try to explain it and advocate, but I think Black women should have a role in how this is played out as well. We're not new to womanist theology at Reform. We've read books by womanists, several books by womanists, and our ladies' call actually did a call. Actually went through a womanist book as well. And so this isn't new to us, but in order to understand womanist theology, I want to introduce this term called intersectionality. Intersectionality. May seem like a complicated word, but I promise it's going to be really important. And for our church, it's important that we know this word because in order to understand things that are spiritual, we have to also understand things that are social. And so we have to know what's going on around us so that we can properly understand and discern what's going on inside of us. I'm talking. It's only 9 minutes in, but I'm talking better than some of y'all typing back to me. So the social has an impact on the spiritual. And so for us to improve spiritually, we also must be aware and educated socially. So watch this.
Welcome to Reformation Church Nashville. We want to thank you for tuning in virtually and in person. We want to usher you into the space of praise and worship. So please join us as we worship together.
All right, can y'all hear me? I'm having a technical difficulty, but if you will give me 2 seconds, I'll be where you want me. And Rachel, you came on just in time to see your video. All right. Okay. Well, this is what we're rolling with. Okay. So sorry, y'all, I had to do a costume change. But the screen is black. All right, we back. We back. Truth is black and white, anyways. That's what they try to tell you. So watch this. Intersectionality. I'm gonna pick up where I was. Intersectionality is looking at how at the intersection of two things. And so there's a scholar by the name of Kimberly Crenshaw, and she framed this word intersectionality specifically around Black women. And so here's basically how it came to be. In the legal context, it is difficult. It was difficult, especially then, for a Black woman to make a claim about how they were being oppressed because there were no terms that were specific enough to speak to their experience. So a Black woman could say, I feel like I'm experiencing racism legally, right? And their boss could say, well, it's not racism because we treat Black men well. And then they could say, okay, well, I feel like you are sexist. They could say, well, we're not sexist because we treat white women well. And so, because racism doesn't quite capture all of it, and because sexism doesn't quite capture all of it, there is a specific type of oppression that Black women experience at the intersection of two systems all at the same time. I just explained that in 30 seconds, and y'all don't even know. Y'all wasn't supposed to get that. That's why my screen went black for a second. Watch this. It's not sexism. They can say it's not sexism. We play sports with Black men. Hello, we invite Black men to our church. They can say it's not sexism. We love white women. And still, Black women Black women would be at the intersection. There's two systems that are colliding on them at the same time. That is creating a type of double jeopardy is the term that they use, right? That is creating a double jeopardy. You're both Black and you're woman and you're female. And so because you are both of these, there's two negatives at the same time, but it's such a unique experience that sometimes terminology is limited. I I'm trying not to stop and preach because I'm really trying to teach this part. So here's what we need to know in order to understand womanist theology. Theology, in order to understand the world in front of the text, let me back up just a little bit more. For the world in front of the text, we examine our values and we also examine who is being considered and who is being centered. So watch this. What's going on, Shauna? Good to see you. In the world in front of the text, we examine values because we bring our own set of values that impact what we see and how we interpret the text. But on top of that, we also have a tendency to, as interpreters, center different people and consider different people. I don't think that's too much different from what Jesus did at times as well. Jesus in Matthew 25 is centering the least of these. As you've done to the least of these, so you've done to me. He realized that in order to get a message across and in order to be in a kingdom and a just and an equitable society, you have to sometimes consider people that other people don't normally consider. You have to sometimes advocate on behalf of people that other people are not willing to advocate on behalf of. And so, because that is the case, sometimes we do the same thing as interpreters, right? So, what I look for in a text may be different from what who else? From what Tanisha, y'all know I got to pick on Tanisha. What I find in the text may be different from what Tanisha finds in the text because we bring two different contexts to the text. And it doesn't mean that just because I'm a preacher, she's right, and just because she's not a preacher, and just because she's not a preacher, she's wrong. But it does mean bring what you have, and that is part of the interpretive process. And so the world in front of the text, different people are being considered. So in womanist theology, theology moves from being theory, something that we think about, something that's a part of our mind. It moves from being theory to being centered around the lives and experiences of Black women. I'm gonna slow down because this is the good part. This is why y'all logged on. With womanist theology, we're moving from theory. There's some theology, some views of God that are highly theoretical, but very limited in its ability to be practiced. It's limited in practicality, but it's limitless in theory. Good to see you, Sister Wilson. And so this is possible, right? With womanist theology, they realize that if it does not center the experiences, watch this, of the people who are being impacted, then it's a worthless theology. If it is a view of God that does not take seriously what each word, what each sermon, what each lesson, what each belief is doing to the people of God, specifically those marginalized people of God, then it's not a sermon worth preaching, it's not a lesson worth teaching, and it's not a church worth visiting. 7:16, y'all. I had my coffee today. I'm waiting on y'all to catch up. I'm waiting because I'm talking better than y'all commenting. And so it centers the experiences of Black women. This is where some of my peers get nervous when it comes to conversation with me because they're not ready. Sometimes I'm not going to say there. Sometimes as preachers, we're not always ready to hear the truth of how we shape experiences of the people around us. So it's easy to preach at somebody, but it's difficult to walk with somebody after you help create part of the world that they live in. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So with womanist theology, it is centered around the experiences of Black women. It's considering their intersectionality. It's considering their identity. And watch this. This is where some people, I may lose 3 of y'all, but don't leave because it's still going to be worth getting, even if you disagree with it. Womanist theology and womanist scholars center all Black women. Now, I added some emphasis, but I'm going to wait for y'all to get it. Womanist scholarship, womanist theology, womanist scholars, people who are using a womanist methodology are centering all Black women. When I say all, I mean all. When they say all, they mean all. That means the ones that you're uncomfortable with, the ones that you don't like, the ones you don't allow in your church, all of them. And it made me think, of course, on American soil, the Black Lives Matter movement is the first Black social movement, first large Black social movement that was not started in the Black church. And people are wondering, how can we be involved and what does this mean for the future of the Black church? And I think it is telling, watch this, but part of the reason that this movement could not start in the Black church is because the women who started the Black movement probably wouldn't have been allowed at your black church. I'm talking. I'm waiting on y'all to catch up. These women that started Black Lives Matter would not be allowed at everybody's black church. And so we're wondering, why is it that these social justice movements, these young movements are being started and are being founded outside of the church? And it's because the church is not okay and not advocating. The church is not considering all people. The church does not have an open door for all people. And so because it was three, I believe, y'all fact check me, I'll fact check myself too, because there are three black women who started it, in which at least one, maybe a few of them are actually identify as queer. It couldn't have started in the church. Why? Because we don't have a theology. We don't have a theology that considers all black women. The black church has a theology that does not consider all of who sits in its pews. And if we are a part of a church that does not consider all people, it's only a matter of time before you are left out of consideration as well. Okay. Okay. I'm going to keep moving, because let me tell you why this is important as it relates to not just black history, but black present, the black church presently. One of the greatest tragedies related to black church is how the black church missed an opportunity to minister to itself and to its community, because the black church was not, because I'm just going to go and take it there. The black church was not prepared and was not willing to pay the cost to deal with topics of sexuality. And so during the late 1900s, when AIDS and HIV was running rampant in our communities and literally killing thousands of people, the black church was silent. Many of them, not all of them. Some of them had some HIV awareness drives. Some of them were speaking and talking about it. But there were so many people who were suffering. Why? Because the black church was not prepared to talk about sexuality, and we were not prepared to actually speak to issues of homosexuality. And so because we didn't do it then, we missed another opportunity with Black Lives Matter. Pastor, what you trying to say? If your theology does not consider all the people who sit in its pews, then you are probably at some point going to run into, at that church, underneath that teaching, who you sit under is important. You're probably going to run into a situation where it doesn't consider you as well. You want to be learning about theologies that consider people. So watch this. So of course, many of these lessons are centered around, are kind of a response to some of the questions that we got after the future Dr. Deja Wilson preached for us in March. And she preached an excellent womanist sermon. It was a sermon that was centered around the experiences of black women. It took seriously the experiences of black women. Some of the news articles, some of the characters, some of the people that okay, watch this. I'm going to take it there. Watch this. When was the last time you were at a church and you heard whoever was preaching actually mention and quote women, yet alone women from scripture? Now, I'm not talking about Jezebel. I'm not talking about don't be Delilah. But how many times have we really heard about Phoebe? Have we heard about Junior? How many times have we heard about Aquila and Priscilla? How many times have we heard about actual women? How many times have these sermons been centered around women? And this isn't even including how many times did we actually let a woman say it? That's a whole nother question, right? But how many times have we actually been a part of a church, been a part of communities where black women's voices and experiences are taken seriously? Good to see you, Dr. Murray. Good to see you. And so watch this. What we're doing when we look at it, when we examine this womanist methodology, what we're doing is we're taking seriously the voices and the experiences of black women. Watch this. In terms of how the text impacts them, as well as how they would interact with the text. Hello, this is watch this. These are a series of lectures that are womanist in nature, not because I'm a black woman, but because we're lifting up the example of Harriet Tubman. This is the Underground Railroad. We're studying our way to freedom. We're lifting up black women. Hello? And so many times you can be a part of a church that is so male-centered that you don't realize that it's actually female oppressive. Ooh, I got to keep moving. I got to keep moving. And so I got to keep moving. And so watch this. Of course, one of the most popular, let me actually give this. So it's centered around Alice Walker, and this term womanish. And it's funny that when I read about it, when I was first introduced to it, because I remember my grandmama using that term. Oh, it's so womanish. Womanist comes from the term womanish. And so I don't even know if I got to define what womanish is. But it's related to a woman, or like an exaggerated, type of womanhood or femininity. And so, and it's also kind of comes from the like this background context of the color purple. And so that's where the term comes from. And it's taken seriously again, the experiences of black women. And so when we read stories of Abram and Sarah and Hagar, womanist methodology causes us to ask, how is womanhood being constructed in the text? And based on how we interpret it and based on how we receive it, how would black women find themselves? And what does this text say about the God that black women live for and are a product of? I'm talking good and fast, so I'm going to slow it down. Watch this. So let's take the story of Hagar, right? It says black women can probably identify with living in a house and feeling like you're a slave because somebody has named you subservient in the house in which you live. Not only that, but then she gets kicked out of the house. She finds herself in the wilderness. Right? This is the story of Hagar, but it too is the story of many black women. And while they're in the wilderness, she runs into an encounter with God. While she's in the wilderness, she has a divine encounter. Watch this. And y'all know this is my favorite part of the story. So I'm just going to skip forward a little bit. And this encounter is so special and so divine that she is able to actually give God a name. This is, and so when we talk about womanist methodology allows it to be empowering to our people and empowering, especially to black women, because although many black women find themselves in an extra oppressive or an extra obscure situation, it does not denounce the fact and it does not deduce the fact that black women can still have divine revelation and a divine encounter in which they have such a special relationship with God. They're able to do things that other people can't. Moses is asking God, who am I going to tell? Who am I going to tell them told me to do all this? I mean, you really want me to go tell them? And what did God do? God revealed himself and gave a name. He said, my name is I am, right? That's the English. I'm going to get into the Hebrew. He says, my name is I am, right? And this is Yahweh is this word that is used and words are added around it to say Jehovah, right? Jehovah Jireh, you're Jehovah Shalom. It's this idea that I'm going to be whoever I will be. And so God is always revealing himself to people. But here we are in the story of Hagar, with this woman who's dealing with systems of oppression. I don't know. I would doubt she signed up to be a slave or to be a secondhand type of wife, but here she is. And in this encounter, when she gets kicked out of the house, she's out in the wilderness. She's trying to fend for herself. She has an encounter with God and says, "You are Elroy. You're the God who sees." Right? Beautiful story. Watch this. But womanist methodology says, what does this have to say to black women who can identify with what it's like to live in the wilderness? I was on a call yesterday. Man, I tell you, our church is blessed to be a part of this Empowering Congregations cohort being hosted by the Oikos Institute and American Baptist College, and it's like innovative, and it's fun, informative, all at the same time. And there was this woman on there giving her testimony that said, "Man, I'm really struggling." Watch this, talking about black women's experience. She said, "I'm struggling as a black single mother because if I don't work a job, I don't have enough. But then when I do work a job, I still don't have enough. Because when I don't have a job, they give me assistance. But when I do have a job, they take away the assistance. But the job that I'm working is not enough to actually make a livable wage. And so I'm not even able to live off of what I make. I'm just struggling trying to make it from day to day." What's she saying? I'm in the wilderness. I'm in the wilderness. And this is why we come to church. This is why methodology is important, because if you are at the right church, your pastor can get up and say, "You know the crazy thing about those of us who know what it's like to live in the wilderness? You have a God who sees you." You can speak to the experience of black women because you've actually been able to center black women in the middle of the methodology. Black women are centered. Black women are considered. And so watch this. I feel like I've been going long these last few weeks. So if you just give me a few more minutes, I'm gonna be where you want me, and we're gonna pick up with this on next week. Right? So we're 1 Corinthians chapter 14 is the backdrop, is the context. Right? And we're centering black women in how the world that we're creating through the process of interpretation impacts black women. And we get to this text that is interesting, that says women are to be silent. And if they have a question, they need to ask their husbands at home. I can read it for you, but we've talked about it every week, because what I want to do is, as we continue to revisit these scriptures, I want us to have different lens so that we can ask different questions and we can come to a deeper revelation. You all know I said in the first one that the greater your ability to question, the deeper your revelation. You're not really in relationship with me if you never take the opportunity to get to know me. And the way you get to know me is by watching me and having a relationship and walking with me, but also getting into engaging in the process of asking questions. Same thing with God, right? We're engaging in this process of asking questions. And watch this. And so when we read passages advocating for women to be silent, but based on womanist methodology, we're centering black women. Now let me back up. I said I wasn't gonna go too far, but I'm gonna do this. Watch this. Here's what's interesting about when you learn to center black women's experiences. I was sitting in class in seminary. I'm gonna give you this brief story. And as we began to share, it's black men, black women, it's white men, white women, it's Hispanic women, it's people with PhDs, it's people with JDs, it's people with just thank you laudis who graduated from college. It's a wide variety of people who are here at this school and who are engaging. And so watch this. We began talking about power and about privilege. And in the middle of the conversation of power and of privilege, I was convicted. Because here I am, watch this. I try my best, right, to be on the right side of justice. That means you've probably seen me at protests. You've seen me advocating. You've seen me calling out systems. And in my context, it was celebrated when I was calling out oppressive systems as it related to white men and police and all the above. But then when I call out how the black church is oppressive as well, all of a sudden that's not justice, that's heresy. Ooh, I wasn't gonna go there, but I'm gonna go ahead. I'm already out there now. I'm already out there. What's going on, Alden? I've been on the side of social justice, right? It was these same black preachers celebrate me when I'm talking about black bodies, right, being killed by police. But when I start talking about black bodies being subjugated to powers of to systemic evils and powers and all of a sudden now it's not justice anymore. It's heresy. No, it's the same person. It's the same heart. It's the same mind. It's the same soul. It's the same interpreter that's not afraid to call out one system and then turn around and call out the other system. And you know what I had to realize? I played a part in it. I had to realize that in the black church, based off of how I contextualize myself and how I bring myself to it as a black man, I have privilege in the black church. I have power in the black church. I'm talking. I'm talking. I had to realize we're doing these papers. In the first paper, I'm just talking, oh, I'm just so oppressed. I can't believe that I live in a world where black people never got reparations. Jewish people got Native American people, everybody got reparations. Black people didn't get reparations. I sure wish that these people in power would concede some power and do the right thing. I wish that they would go back and make up for all of the wrong that they did before. I'm calling out all these injustices when I'm on underneath the boulder of oppression, when oppression is crushing me. Watch this. And then God said, well, what's your position in the black church? And you know what I realized? It's unpopular, but it's true. In the black church, the black man is equivalent to the white man in society. In the black church, it's not everybody's church. In the black church, there is no higher hierarchy than black men. And unfortunately, because there's so few places where black men can actually be allowed leadership and be honored and be respected as a leader, black men are so afraid to let that stronghold go because it's difficult to be leaders and be respected and revered as a leader in other spaces, that it's more comfortable to let black women continue to be oppressed in church, even when we know it ain't right, than it is to actually do what's right. You know what I had to do? I had to sit with, God has given me privilege. And based on this privilege, I got to do what's right. Based on this privilege, I have to do what I want other people to do. I want other people to give me a chance. Guys say, what are you doing for women? I wanted other people to try to make things right. When I'm in a room with white people, I want them to acknowledge what happened. I want them to be attentive, pay attention, at least listen. Right? And God said, what are you doing with your privilege? What are you doing with your power? And so unapologetically, I'm bringing that to the text. I'm bringing my privilege, but I'm also, I'm not just bringing my privilege. I'm acknowledging what happened, and I'm engaging with a certain level of humility and a spirit of repentance. And we don't talk about that enough in church. And so watch this. Because these texts are, as we're interpreting these texts, we're also creating this world, right? And what I have to say was, God, as much as this world has been created for me, you're calling me to help create a world. And this is why I say it before reform, right? This is why I say it before Rosara. God, if I have a daughter and I know better, I don't want my daughter to have to live like this. I don't want her to go to a church that she can lead everywhere else but can't lead in church. I don't want her to go to a church where she's empowered in every other space, but in church, you got to find somebody in order for you to be somebody. So when I read text about silence, I realize, no, I don't know if we're centering black women in 1 Corinthians 14, I don't know if this text can really give us what I think people are trying to have it give us. Because black women, I know some people say black women are loud and all that, but they've been silent enough, right? They've been silent enough. I don't know if they need to be silent. And you know what a womanist theologian would do? They probably talk back. Paul, I know you said I need to be silent. But then you know that our ancestors were silent when they were being raped by white, right? And they go down this whole line about how sometimes silence is not the answer. Not to say that the text may not be inspired, not to say that Paul may not have been writing to a specific context, but it is to say if you're going to apply this context to me, can you think about how it's impacting me when you tell me what it means? I've been live for 35 minutes, and I said I was going to try to keep it to 30 tonight. Watch this. Here's what I want us to take away. As we are looking at, and my goal for next week, I wanna bring somebody on here as a guest. What I'm probably gonna do. I can't make no guarantees, but I'm gonna try to bring somebody on here as a guest with me next week, so that we can dive more into Scripture. But I want us to understand the methodology that is known as womanist theology, womanist methodology. So when we talk about womanist theology, it's taking seriously the experiences of Black women and how these experiences impact their view of God and our view of God. And watch this. All right, let me just do it this way. It was a lot of teaching tonight. If you got something from this, just drop some fire or something in the chat. If you got at least one thing, right? I really didn't stick to my notes too well. Y'all pray for me. But from intersectionality, who learned what intersectionality means, right? I mean, sometimes we don't even have language to describe what we go through. And so Kimberly Crenshaw said it's intersectionality. It's not just one thing, it's a few things. Sometimes that's impacting one person. And these systems can leave you so traumatized at times you don't even have the words, you don't even have the feelings, you just know something's wrong. Right? We have womanness. We talked about how you have to center all Black women. And the reason why there's social movements that are being started outside of the church, I see y'all in the comments now. I felt like I was talking to myself. The reason why there are movements being started outside of the church is because the people inside of the church are not actually being welcoming to people to actually come in the church and learn about God and let God deal with however they choose to walk afterwards. Because the church refuses to deal with sexuality and is illiterate and all the above as it relates to sexuality. Unfortunately, these movements are being started outside of the church. And so we have to be a space of education. We have to be willing to learn. And man, when we start to read text and wonder, how's this impacting Black women in a Black church in which Black women make up 70% of the church, you ought to be able to demand that Black women are considered. I gotta go. Black women are 70% of the church. And you mean tell me we centering everybody else but Black women? You ought to be able to speak for Black women. You ought to be able to advocate for Black women. Because I'm very history aware, right? But Black women have been the heart and soul of a lot of the movements and just didn't get the credit socially, historically, all the above. And so we're going to pick back up next week with womanist theology. We're going to deal with a little bit more Scripture, but tonight I wanted to introduce the topic. I wanted to introduce the lens. And as we read Scripture this week, I want us to think about, and not just think about, but take seriously, what is this text saying to Black women if we were to center Black women? How are Black women being impacted? And watch how God speaks to in unique ways when we change what we bring to the text and we're honest about what we bring to the text and we're willing to look at it with a fresh lens. That's all we're doing. We're not changing the Scripture. We're just being honest about who is interpreting, and we're giving you different tools so you can interpret well and interpret in an educated fashion. So love y'all. I'm going to see you Sunday, and then I'll see you next Tuesday. Well, thanks for coming with me, studying our way to freedom on the Underground Railroad.